Hi, my name is John Tures, and you are watching the Break It Down show. And I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me too, man. I like it. We don't get to spend enough time talking with each other. I want to try to change that. We're also both very busy. I mean, you just saw how hard it was for us to get together.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, is your plate full? How much extra capacity for things do you have on your plate?
Not much.
I have
I'm
the
old
same
school.
count. I have the same notebook right over there across my trailer for myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that I'm working on. I love it, and I love the projects that I'm working on.
Mhm.
And there's always things waiting in line to make it on my plate. What is something that's not on your plate right now, but you're desperate to get to it at some point, but it can't find its way onto that plate?
Oh, okay. Well, one thing believe it or not, is you get better papers from students if you actually write an example of what they're supposed to do. So they're
Mm,
looking at the top 30 countries where refugees are coming to this country. Nobody picked South Sudan, so I was going to do some research on that. I love John Grisham's book, Suli, which is about a South Sudanese kid who comes over to play basketball in the US. And so I decided to take that on, and I just need a couple hours. I don't know where I'm going to find them with the grading and other things. As a
yeah.
professor, I'm running a race this weekend, but I want to sneak in there and get to learn about why this country, which broke away from Sudan, which was supposed to solve all the problems, make it a Christian country, and why it's just fallen into chaos. I know it's bad. I just don't know why yet.
This is a wonderful place to start our conversation because
Hmm.
we both look at these problems from different expertise levels, but we're all in the same bubble of the problem. And I'll just take this and move this further. And again, this is always that's it. This is not a political conversation, right? This is
Right.
more of a policy conversation. So I see Secretary Rubio. I'm thrilled with how he's doing. I think most every regular person who can see, the positive. I think they're all pretty happy with him. But the idea that stabilizing Venezuela is going to be like a simple 1, 2, 3 process, like he explained the other day in his speech, I know better because I've been there and I've seen all. I understood the plan for Afghanistan. That didn't happen, and
Mm.
so until we start reliably and repeatedly, like an academic grade thing, we don't just get to go into places and act like, oh, we'll fix this with some stability. Stability is not the norm. Stability is abnormal, I would say overall. How am I
Mhm.
doing?
Sounds really good. Venezuela used to be a model country, from 1958 when Pedro Jimenez was overthrown. They were like their shining example of democracy. The oil, which helped us out during the shocks of 73 and 79. I mean, they were a model country, but the corruption in both political parties and their two-party system, paved the way for Hugo Chavez to come in. And he had a very different idea, this populist dictator for all intents and purposes. And yeah, when he's had enough time to run the country into the ground, I'm not sure Humpty Dumpty can be put back together, nor can we say, well, let's just wipe the slate clean necessarily and just
Yeah.
brand new start all over. That'd be ideal, but if it's not possible, we got to start thinking about that, and definitely have to work in the Venezuelan groups. Maybe somebody who's more pragmatic amongst the Chavez regime, the people who are
Yeah.
supporting, who push for democracy. Let's get them down and start thinking about what can be done.
Yeah. Man. And by the way, just to be fair to everybody, when you were describing Chavez, you could have said Trump in front of every one of those things, and there'd
Mm,
be, listen, 50 plus million people that would agree with that sentiment, right? And so
mm,
this is significant when you're trying to run your own country and keep stability. And there's just this battering ram going on, battering on battering ram. And I'm in the middle on this. I want our country to do well, but I also don't want my neighbors to be terrified of all the things they're terrified of, right? And so this is it. And just because you do 100 things doesn't mean you bat 100. There's going
yeah.
to be some failure in there, right? So all of this stuff, it's very complex. We talk about corruption and all these things. We're seeing corruption in a lot of places. And then as you go to a tactic, we had a show yesterday. We were talking about it was a me and another guy that I know, also a spy, and then another spy, and he works in the finance side of this stuff now. And
Ooh.
we were talking how, like, if you tear the corrupt part of the financial mechanisms that move money and retard the flow of money, well, that's bad for the whole nation. and all of a sudden you get these secondary consequences that are immediate to like, hey, we pulled this black heart out of this thing, but that pulled a lot of good stuff out with it, and now the machine would be even more and maybe even irreparably. So it's easy to create chaos and instability, even though you're doing the right thing.
Right. I'm listening to David Baldacci's The 620 Man, and I'm not sure how
Yeah,
recent it is, but we're getting into the financial world, and you've got this ex-military veteran who's investigating a murder, and you get to realize there's a murder going on with the U.S. economy in terms of foreign agents, money jumping around, people questionable
sure.
loyalties. And I'm listening to this going, I so hope this is really fiction. I hope you just totally made this stuff up because it sounds terrifying. And I'm like, God, how can I be so naive? I never even thought about some of this stuff.
Oh my God, it's amazing. One of the things that I've learned through my show is that money moves at the speed of light and it never rests. Yes, there's a pallet full of $100 bills over there, but that money's not really there. That's not real money. And it's just whipping around. And all you're trying to do is kind of scoop in it so it kind of comes into your barrel for an instant so that you can make money off that money. And then it's gone again. It never rests. Like the second a dollar exchanges hands electronically from someone to somebody else, it's being used in 1,000 ways. And it's amazing. And so when a criminal organization is dumping billions of dollars into a system, if you took that out, if you stop that, first off, we love sex, drugs, and all kinds of stuff here in America, right? Talk about a
Mhm.
drug dealer. Whoever the president is, the world's biggest drug dealer, right? Because we move drugs like crazy. It's the system is the system. It is crazy to think about how intermingled all of the legitimate and illegitimate things are within how we run the world.
Yeah. I'm doing research for a historical fiction piece, which is set in 1901 when McKinley is assassinated. And so I've been listening to Teddy Roosevelt, and he saw, the massive power of the trusts and monopolies and how all the laws were watered down. He wanted to do something about it. And I've been listening to how long it took through the courts, through Congress. I mean, in your textbooks, you get like a little paragraph going, Teddy Roosevelt took on trusts and he was partially successful. It's like, whoa,
Yeah,
there's a lot more, plus things that we can learn today about how he had to make allies with this guy. His nickname was Pitchfork, who is this horrible racist senator who, opposite party, who he hated, but they both hated trusts the same way. So even though they couldn't be in the same room with each other, they had to work together to deal with this common problem.
yeah, boy. The that there's so many things to discuss within this. It's fascinating. I want to get back to the Rubio thing because
Sure.
if I don't, we'll never get back to it. When
Mhm.
we talk about a place like, I remember the South Sudan narrative coming out. Hey, this is why we're going to do this. This is why it's important. Hey, this is why Venezuela is important. This is why we're going to do it. And then, I hear the standard plan like, oh, no, we're going to do it better than the next guy, whatever it is. Can you think of a recent, and I mean like the last, we'll say 30 years, example of a country going from instability, total chaos to, a stable place? Do you have any examples in mind?
Well, believe it or not, I have a couple from Latin America. Do you remember, with El Salvador, and you had the FMLN, you had the right wing
Yeah,
death squads, Duarte, but you started to see some of the moderate groups coming in. El Salvador stabilized themselves, and people said, look, this is a good model of how to come out of this unstable system. And now we look at it going, oh, I don't, you got this guy from the FMLN party, but then he's a populist and he goes right wing and cryptocurrency. And now a lot of people are like, I don't think that's a good model. I think, we can find times where you can build some breathing space, but we can't let things go on autopilot. You'll remember East Europe, when they threw off communism. I went over and visited a lot of these countries. I got to study there, and I was like, we were so excited for East Europe seeing freedom. And then they kind of went on the back burner, and now most of these countries are taken over by populists who are, like just whether it's Slovakia or Hungary or Poland or something, they don't look as free as they used to. And
yeah,
so those are perhaps some examples that if we just kind of put things on a back burner, don't think about them, don't work to integrate them, it's not just add them to NATO and they'll be more stable.
yeah, yeah. That is true. And there's another thing too with like these I guess you would say conglomerate of nations. Like when they're trying to band together to increase their space, especially after Carney's speech during Davos. They're trying
Mm.
to amass this power. But if and this is a true thing for Ukraine. Okay, so let's say you and I want to go do business in Ukraine. We've got a great Ukrainian partner. Everything's all solid and good. And as the corruption in their system starts to deny us legality, we have to start funding the legal system to get our outcome because you can buy that outcome. It's a very common thing around the world, everybody. Okay, so we do all this, and then still the system's like, hey, that factory to build, oh, I don't know, let's say flour, we're going to keep that anyhow. And so then we exit the Ukrainian system legally and go into the European system to put the foot down on top of this to get the legitimate decision to go our way. We can win in the European court, and they will demand that the Ukrainians release and let us have our flour plant. And then Ukraine's like, no. And you're left with this thing. And this happens in a lot of places of the world. So when you have a country that won't abide another region's laws, even though they're subordinate to it, you know, it makes it hard to get in external finances into a place to bolster and improve stability. And so even when you think you have stability, Pete would say it's still in doubt because it takes a lot to integrate that country into the system. I think El Salvador is a great example of a place where it's working, but these are not slow or gentle processes. They take a long time to get sorted out. We can look at Korea and Japan and be like, hey, it's been 80 years in the case of Japan, and almost we'll be at 80 here pretty quick with Korea. Not simple stuff to pull off.
Yeah, I remember seeing a piece back just as I was starting in graduate school, and it compared what they called the Westphalia system with the Philadelphia system. Now I'm like a Atlanta Braves fan, so I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
Philadelphia. And so then what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the states coming together to form this constitution, and we tend to think, oh well, U.S. is big and full of resources and super rich, and we're powerful now. We're looking at it through the lens of us in 2000, as opposed to looking at how backwater we were in the
right.
1780s. And you had things like, not only did you have territorial disputes during the Articles of Confederation, we nearly had several wars. America was broke, bankrupt, struggling to get on by. And not only that, but to get money, to get support, each of them promised territories in what we call the Old Northwest, or they promised territories, just west to the Mississippi. These often overlapped. I honestly think that what scholars need to do is look at what the U.S. was able to do to keep, other than the Civil War, which is, of course, a major thing, how little conflict there's been and how the states have been able to agree on policy. What did they do then when we didn't have scads of money and we weren't an economic and political superpower?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Why did it work out? I mean, even just the fact that we reintegrated, and again, not gentle, but we
Oh,
reintegrated the South into this nation, and we avoided having 100 years of. Some people probably disagree with this, but open conflict with the South. That's. I'm not a professor, you are, but that seems exceptionally rare
oh,
to
well,
manage.
and you're right that you did have a lot of terrible things, but uh, during Reconstruction, you also didn't have the Second Civil War. I mean, there were politicians in the Confederate States who are like, form guerrilla bands, have lots of tactics. I mean, even Nathan Bedford Forrest years later, after he was running the Klan and doing all of his terrible things, he started to realize if he wanted to be in business, you couldn't do things that way, and he wound
Mm,
up working with Sherman to round up a lot of Klansmen who were quite unrepentant and destroying our country. And I thought, well, yeah, if we're going to talk about Nathan Bedford Forrest, let's tell the whole story about him, not to rehabilitate him, but to show that even smart people can realize that the Klan was a no go.
right, right, and that threat. I mean, I guess I would divide. This is going to be really. This is going to be a really big brush, like painting the entire Empire State Building in one stroke, right? Big brush.
Mhm.
But people tend to divide into three camps. There's and however you want to couch this, there's a lot of ways of doing it. There's the status quo, the fuck those guys were leaving, and then the adopters like we want more. And so, like, I think Puerto Rico is a good example, or like French Canada, they got the people that are like, hey, it's good like it is. Why do we mess with it? Kind of thing. So, given that, there's always going to be the people that are going to be contrarian to any situation. Even if there was utopia, there'd be people like, yeah, but we could have more utopia or whatever. And so you always have that dude who's like, I will put 10 guys together and we will band up and we will go and make this hard on everybody physically, whatever it is. And if that person can amass more people, then hey, you got big problems. And along those lines, we see like these messianic or on the Islamic side, these guys that say, hey, I'm the Mufti, I'm coming back, right? And they band people together and they can take over cities at their biggest, right? And that's a really crazy thing. Or a region like ISIS, when they're trying to return a caliphate, these are the folks that are the contrarians of things.
Mm-hmm. Uh, it's I can remember when I worked in Washington D.C. A popular theory was you had this frustration aggression hypothesis where people
Yeah.
would get upset, they get angry, and then there would be an actor that would say, all right, I'm going to channel in all your demands and we're going to produce change, whatever form that is. That could be positive or negative, and it was up to the institutions, could they handle this person or resist if they were going against what the core is. I remember seeing
Yeah.
a piece that showed in the 1990s. This is like late 1990s. Stock market is going through the roof. Unemployment super low. Inflation is super low. No major wars. And more than 50% of people said the country was headed on the wrong track. So speaking of contrarian, it's like, what would you like?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. What would you like? Yeah. And on the changing it for the better side, you don't control the outcome, right? Like we have a South Sudan. How's it going? We still are trying to sort out the former Yugoslavian states into what works and what doesn't. Slovenia pretty well sorted out, but the further south you go, the more conflict there is. And I think you and I both agree, like if in 20 years from now there was not a United States in the way it's currently configured, wouldn't surprise us.
And boy, it does seem very different. Like, what's that phrase? We live in a different world than whatever. And this is very different. And
Yeah.
people will have to decide, where are you going to stand? They used to say, all right, in politics, there is no sidelines. It's not like sports. And
Yes.
we're like, yeah, but there were sidelines. Now there are no sidelines. It's just like the way we used to say it and stuff. And everybody's got to take a position. There are times where I will write something, like I wrote something saying Republicans and Democrats are starting to see that ICE is going a little too far. That's about the
Yeah.
most moderate thing you can say, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
bipartisan agreement that maybe there needs to be change. Oh my gosh, the hate that started pouring in on social media. I thought this is the most moderate column you'll ever find. And I back it
Yeah.
up with sources. I even
Yeah.
gave the quote where Trump said he was on the same wavelength as Tim Walz. And I thought this is a good way to bring people together on an issue. And no, it made people madder.
Yeah. Well, I wrote every now and then I'll get these questions, right? Because I've got a lot of experience and I'm exposed to a lot of thinkers like you and my buddy Rich. And so I get to hear a wide palette of things. And I can have two brilliant people who disagree 100%. Those two people could sit down and talk and have beers and be like, yeah, we disagree here. But there's more agreement than there's not. But that's not what's portrayed on TV or on this infernal device. I mean, it's like, come on,
Oh yeah.
man. So I wrote something very, very much down the middle. Like, listen, you get to be upset with Donald Trump. He does things that are exacerbating and terrifying, and he does them on purpose for whatever reason. So if you feel uncomfortable about Donald Trump, well, that's valid, right? Also, not everything he does is bad. And so like and so the whole thing was because I kept getting these questions to my friends, and I adore my friends. I don't want them to feel this fear. Like, is World War III starting? And this can push us into the Greenland thing. Because Greenland and right before that, Venezuela, right? It's like, are we going into World War III? Iran? No, 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 no. We're not going into World War III. To make a World War III happen, it takes so much energy and so much disagreement among these places that don't. It just doesn't. There's so much money for Bedford Forest to make. It's really hard to shut that machine off and turn into this war machine when people don't really want that. And that's basically what I said without adding the all of those details in there. It's just very simple. Like, no, this is things are they're elected to make this change. So we'll form president. That's going to be uncomfortable. Not everything he does is bad. I think we'll be all right. And then that was it. And then a couple of days later, I wrote a post about ICE, and I put in, and so that was that, and that got a lot of positive reception, but also got a lot of negative reception, like crazy, like and so then the ICE stuff was happening in Minnesota, and I said, insert Pete's, wisdom based, experience based, you know, note that says, hey, everything's going to be all right. And then down below in the remarks went, insert insanity below, and
Yeah.
then the insanity showed up because people are just desperate to respond in a way that to me doesn't make sense. And so the calming things, the hey, like this is withstandable. It may not be ideal. Maybe ICE needs improvements. Maybe we need to improve our immigration system. Hey, how about Congress? Where are them with the state of the art immigration policy? What are they doing? Right. So
Oh yeah.
these things don't
Just
just come from one source. Please.
oh yeah, yeah. In Georgia, in my state, there was a big raid on a Hyundai plant in over by Savannah, and they detained a lot of these South Koreans in very unfavorable conditions. And South Korea had been saying, "We don't understand your visa system." They were training Americans on how to build these types of plants or something like that. South Korea is an ally. They're heavily invested around here with Kia and things like that, and so we see them as a great partner. And our Republican governor Brian Kemp is like flying over to South Korea to like say, trying to smooth over things. But it was like, I was like, when you were saying Congress needs to fix the system, evidently whatever South Korea was saying, they're like, we just don't understand what you're trying to get us to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't either. I watched, here's the thing too that I do, and I'm sure you're in the same camp. I watch the actual interview, the actual speech, and I don't just like go okay to everything I hear. I evaluate it and I go okay, this is. I saw Tom Homan say, "Hey, we're talking to Tim Walz and the crew over there, and they are agreeing to let us arrest these people in prisons. They weren't doing that before, so there's movement that way. This is not about winning; it's just improvement."
Right,
So that will allow them to get rid of people that are in the area. All right. And then he said these words out loud, and I'll paraphrase: if you're here illegally and you're not committing crimes, we're not looking for you. Just continue to go through the process and try to get yourself,
yeah,
that's Tom Homan saying that, right? And so we
yeah.
have this confusion about what's going on, and this real, I guess it's just a cognitive dissonance in every direction. It's not like a left thing or right thing. It's just we struggle with this, and somehow we've taken the word ICE and made it be a terrible thing when we all want less murderous and criminally insane people running around our streets from other countries who aren't here legally, right? We all want less of that.
Yeah, they
How do
they
we?
are not
How do we
they are not easy to find. I mean, a
no.
lot when you hear about people being arrested at their immigration hearing, these are not people who are showing up for their immigration hearing. It is hard to find these people, and you'll be the first to tell me more than I know about when we try to use statistics to show we're winning a war, thus Vietnam War. And I feel like there's too much oh yeah, well we deported X number of people. I'm more worried about quality rather than quantity. I
Yeah.
want the most dangerous person who has no business being here. I'm in Georgia. That's where Laken Riley was killed when she went out running. I'm a runner,
Yeah.
very sympathetic to that. I want that person deported. I don't want the 10 people who show up to their scheduled immigration court you know, who are trying to, get everything taken care of legally, who have family and friends who are here. That's not who I want deported. And
Right.
if you treat it like it's a body count statistic thing, we'll lose just as bad as we did then. I mean, I'm a reform ICE person. I'm not a abolish ICE. And now abolish ICE is leading
Yeah.
the keep ICE in whatever form because of things like Operation Metro Surge, because of statements saying we're going to go to blue states, because of masks, because of number of cell phone images people have of tactics, because of stories. And it's like now we're in a far worse position. I wrote a piece that was about ICE training after Renee Good was killed, and I said
Mhm.
I did some research and I found under Obama it was like 20 some odd plus weeks of training. Now it's 47 days. And it's like, okay. And there were even some Republicans after I read it who were like, yeah, we could use better training. And I got a piece saying, well, better training for the guards at Dachau wasn't going to help.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite the same, but that's what's in their
Yeah.
headspace, right?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah. Yeah.
not
Yeah.
looking for
Well,
reform. They want significant change.
so this is where, and this is, and I love this conversation because these are the kind of areas where it hurts, right? And like, I'm going to poke you, you're going to poke me, we're going to be like, you know what? Ow, yeah, that hurts. And I'm not defending ICE. I'm just like, these are the real things, like, so when does the politics stop and the policy start? Where's that line, right? So if you need to flex in capacity, one of the ways you do it is like, we'll do on the job training. We'll have these guys supervised. And I'm not justifying any bad behavior, right? But when you scope back and you're like, how many people have you arrested? Great. Look at their rap sheets. Okay, great. If you're standing next to somebody that gets arrested because they got to go into the wild and find them, and that person's got a bag of cocaine, hey, guess what? That person's got to go to jail. The cops can't ignore that. That's not their job. The job is to put them in front of a judge. And so we have these things where, because of bad policy, we ended up in a situation where too many people here who are criminally insane, doing things like raping and killing people. And so we needed to deal with that, right? And instead of the city cooperating, which they get to do, they get to say no thanks. ICE has to go into the streets, and they have to have more people there, and more people draws more people. And then the politics comes in, right? Like, let's crowd people around those people and let's make a mess. And so these self-fulfilling prophecies, of course, someone died. When you put that much chaos in an area, of course, that's not the norm. That's not what happens normally. Am I saying an ICE raid is gentle? No, it's not. It's a small conflict, and people can die in those things. And we've seen that happen too. But if we inflate the political side of these policy decisions, then, I think we start to spin around in a crazy circle, driving ourselves crazy. And we lose sight of the fact that we do. And I think, I don't know how you'd find the mass, way more than 50% of Americans love immigrants. We want immigrants to be here. We have a shit system. Yeah. I mean, we love them, right? And so we get told that we don't, but it's like, no, we love that. We love the immigrant story. How many people are you from that immigrant story where, like, that person came with $1 and they got here and they made it happen here? We all love that. But I keep getting told that I don't like immigrants. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? And I mean, like, me as like the greater American, right? Like, you hate, you're a racist, you're other. Like, no. But we have to have a system. We have to have a way to integrate these folks and care for them. It's inhumane to have people coming across and putting them in this illegal trap that takes tens of thousands of dollars in 10 years to maybe fix, if you can.
I mean, I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I mean, several people on our soccer team, several people in my private high school, they came from Mexico. People would come over, study, go back. I mean, it wasn't that much different from Georgia, Alabama, just down the road, where I was, except that, you paid like a 25-cent toll or something driving over the bridges or so. And we can do that. I feel like there's been rhetoric that's ramped up, not a majority of people, but enough people where I can get hate messages on ICE, or, if I write about it, like, oh, these immigrants are doing, and Cato Institute, which is free market, and they'll show the statistics on immigrants. Nobody, and they're like, oh, you cook the books, you lie. Well, one, it's worth deporting 1 million immigrants for one death or so. And it's like, come on, we're not that, and we're better than that.
Yeah, we are. And I think we are, as a nation, like, we do a better job of that than that.
I mean, we're not yet at problem. Oh yeah, when I said there were more people who want ICE abolished than keeping ICE, it's still not over 50%. It's 46, 41, and then the don't know. But at the same time, it's like, whoa, and it's not all, oh, Tim Falls and Jacob Fry told everyone to get in the streets. Most people who are in the streets, they may not even know who Jacob Fry is. They probably haven't even heard what Tim Walz is. If he hadn't run for vice president, they probably would have never heard him. They're there because they can see images, they get upset, disturbed, what they think looks like, a terrible action. They'll be out there, and further violence against those who are showing up to do all this is just undermining the whole thing. So I'm hoping that we can still keep a reformed ICE. I know that's controversial for a professor to say, but I mean, we risk losing the whole thing because some of it is, yeah, some people are going to put themselves in harm's way, just like they did during the civil rights movement, and
Right.
they don't need a Democratic Party quote. They mostly get quotes from hardliners saying something that
Yeah.
they'll think, "My God, my whole democracy could be gone. The battle line is here."
Yeah. And I hope that as long as we can keep talking, right, having these
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
conversations, we can start to sort out with, because when you run out of words, that's when you have to fight, right? And I don't think we're close to that spot, but it's
No.
uncomfortable. The words are very angry words, and
Mhm.
and even just like the word ICE, like I just call them federal law enforcement agents because that's what they are. And if they're doing legal things, they're legally deporting people, especially people with deportation orders, right? If you go out and
Mhm.
get those folks, you don't have to like that, but that is your legal system saying this person does not belong here. They need to go. All right. Well, then go do that. And if you don't like that, by all means, activate, do politics, get elected, support people, right? Do all the things that we're allowed to do within our system. But you don't, just because you don't like an outcome, get to override the system. And that works for everybody, right? And so all of these systems, let me ask you this. I am
Mhm.
uncomfortable with any president um, governing via executive fiat. I just do not like the executive order system. I can
Mhm.
understand and wrap my head, though I don't like it, saying, "Hey, I'm going to prime the pump and get this law in place." But a lot of intel operations operate off of a decades old, half a century old executive order. When is Congress going to do their job and codify that into law? And then, by the way, fund it, put it into the budget so it's legal. But why is this part of our government system so out of step with how it seems to be designed?
Uh, I, obviously people have their incentives, why,
Yeah.
you know, fear of change. There's obviously a lot of money in the system that makes a lot of decisions. I do want to say
Mhm.
that, locally, I was raised a Republican,
Yeah.
the Republican thing. No, not everyone would consider me so, but the Republican Party here in town, they invite me to events. I go to events. I bring students.
Yeah.
The local politicians, I'll be in selfies with them. I'll do
Yeah.
stories about the candidates they bring in because I figure, well, they came
Sure.
all the way to Tripp County, may as well cover them. So we had John F. Kennedy. I know, not that Kennedy, the state
The other
senator who's
one,
running
the
for
alive one.
lieutenant
Yeah.
governor as a GOPer, and former Tennessee coach Derek Dooley, who's the son of Vince Dooley or grandson, whatever his
Yeah.
family. He's part of the Dooley family. Well, one of these events I went to, there was a guy who stood up and he pointed at me, and this is in large room full of Republicans, and he goes, he's that liberal columnist who writes for the LaGrange Daily
Oh my
News, and
God.
he's not a real Republican or so. And it got real quiet. Everybody like looked around, kind of like, you ever see Ghostbusters when that guy was screaming for help and banging on the window, and then
Yeah.
when he slid on down, everyone just went back to eating. That's exactly what it was like. And there were a couple of people around me who know me, and they were like, "Yeah, what was up with that guy?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, we know you write for the columns, and we don't always agree, but sometimes we agree with some of what you say." It was like kind of
Yeah.
that's reality, though, and I think that
That is.
doesn't get covered, and we need a lot more of that. I'll
Okay.
bring in a Democrat and a Republican state legislator, and they'll talk about their similarities and differences. They'll talk about a former House Speaker who was a Democrat who said, the Republicans are not the enemy. The enemy is the Senate, who's going to change everything, that all of our work, and force us to take it. So,
Yeah. Of
when my students hear that, they're like, "Oh, okay." Because I teach students who are conservative. I teach students who are liberal,
course.
uh,
Right. Yeah.
and I don't, and they have to learn how to get along together because that's what they're going to have to do afterwards.
Yeah.
So we don't,
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of knife fights here or something.
It's funny. I get invited to a lot of things too. And I know that I'm in the middle because I'll hear my friends in the right talk and I'm like, oh boy. Yeah. you know,
Mhm.
and I know that's not me. And then I'll hear my friends in the left talk and I'm like, oh boy, whew. And I know that
Mm.
that's not me. There's parts of me in both of those worlds. And ultimately, I'm pretty look, you know, get one definition of a libertarian, I defy you to do it. Like it won't happen, right? So there's a lot of libertarian in how I do the things, but hey,
Right.
this guy won the election, and what a thankless job being president can be. I mean, it's awful. People are going to scream at your staff and as they go eat dinner and all these crazy things that happen. Thank you for just doing the job. Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
it's hard. So
Mhm.
um, I, I also am like some representative from some other place will say something. I don't care. Like whatever happens, like in your part of the world, if your representative says something, it doesn't mean anything to me. If it's we're all part of the same nation, but you guys get to have that's your representative. Vote somebody else in if you don't like that guy, and if you like him, that's your guy. All right, what am I going to do
Yeah.
about that? That's got nothing to do with me.
Uh,
I don't care what AOC does or fill in the blank Republican representative who I don't care. I don't care. These people don't care about me. I don't care about them. We all agree that like, hey, we're all doing our own thing. It's cool. I'm cool
mhm.
like that. But god damn, people get upset. I'm going to talk about Greenland real quick. I know
Sure.
we're kind of
Okay.
changing gears here.
Hey, I
What are
got a
your
question for
thoughts?
you before you talk about
Yeah,
Greenland. Have you ever
please.
seen the movie The Bedford Incident?
No, I haven't. I don't know if you've been.
Oh, you need to make that.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
65 Turner Classic Movies. It's a Cold
Yeah.
War cat and mouse game, destroyer versus submarine in the
Okay.
waters around Greenland.
Okay. Okay. Great.
So
I love
Russians
it.
versus Americans. You'll
All
love
right.
it. Trust me.
I'll put I'll put this up in the thing here. I'll put the Wikipedia link in here, everybody. You guys can get
Oh
mad at
yeah.
me for using Wikipedia, but
Yeah,
you
don't
can.
do the don't just the intro. Don't do no spoilers or anything. How it turns out.
Yeah.
But Richard
Right.
Widmark,
Yeah.
Sidney
It's
Poitier,
a 60-year
all
old
star
movie,
cast.
man.
Oh,
Everybody's had a
oh,
chance.
but when I was
I'm
working
looking
as a
forward to
defense,
it.
oh yeah, when I was working as a defense contractor, there was a military guy who said, "Oh, this is what's going on with the Russians is just
Mhm.
like the Bedford incident. You've seen that, of course, right? Or the book?" And I'm like. So we
No.
watched it and
Okay.
thing, and I'm like, I now use it in my classes to show
Oh,
a lot of
so good.
psychological decisions under stress, Cold
Yeah.
War, us versus them kind of things, and then others who think differently.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, everybody go check that out. I definitely I know I will. I love stuff like that. And is that Sidney Poitier seeing this thing?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
He's
it.
a
I love
reporter
him.
who's who's on board covering what's going on.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. So I get the strategic idea. Hey, we want to protect ourselves from missiles. That sounds like a smart thing, especially as the world evolves. And so Golden Dome. All right, let's figure that out. But I also understand that Europeans are uh, they are very conservative when it comes to doing things. Right. I'm not saying politically conservative. They just like you might cause a ruckus. Let's not cause a ruckus. And so they're very slow to move on things. So I get the political agitation to get them to move because I've been in meetings and here come the Europeans and like, let's not do anything. Let's wait and see. Like, no, and we're Americans. So we're like, no, let's go through the saloon doors and make it happen. So I get all of that. But what are your thoughts in general on Greenland?
Yeah, I don't think that Russia and China are all over Greenland, sailing all around, ready to take it over. They Russia's already our neighbor or something like that. I mean, if
Right.
there's a plan for rare earth minerals, the NATO alliance is more important to me than us adding Greenland to the United States.
Sure.
And
Sure.
maybe that's not what everyone else thinks, but I think that when I've looked at polling data, that's where an overwhelming majority of people are. And the reason I bring up the Bedford incident is it's something that if when you watch the movie, you'll get to see it didn't need to go that way. It didn't
Right.
have the outcome didn't have to happen that way. It was through mistakes. And then, because there have been times you probably studied World War One a little bit where nobody was
Mhm.
necessary. It was the war nobody wanted. And
Right.
I agree with you. We're not ready for World War III, but even a nasty militarized interstate dispute, we're already fraying at the alliances a little bit. This is Russia. Why are they so supportive of us getting over Greenland? Well, they don't
Right.
necessarily want us to have Greenland. They want NATO destroyed.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
concept of it where we turn on each other, even if we never fired a shot, just a diplomatic World War III would be a huge win for Putin. And hopefully cooler heads will prevail and we won't do that.
Yeah, these things again. I'm just going to keep saying it. These things are always just so complex, and you
Right.
start digging. You're like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, like I'm ready for my opinion. I already know my opinion is going to be not as accurate as it needs to be to talk about this intelligently. But yeah, man, I mean, everything you said is like it's legitimate. And then there's also the whole thing of if 10 years from now China owned the northern shipping lanes, and we were exposed because we didn't take this action. You'd be like, why didn't we take this action? Because we that's how these things go. We talk about like failures of intel to see something. We saw 9/11 coming. We had the people in place. But one of my buddies, he was my commander in Bosnia. His team, they had found it. But and would they have prevented it? Who knows, right? But we knew about it. We knew something was happening. We knew there was a cell. There were several, and they identified where they were, and we want to hear about it. We they had to. This is crazy, and this is not a big secret. They've testified in front of Congress and everything. They were ordered because it's illegal to collect on Americans in a certain fashion, and they had data mining, like an early attempt at data mining that was successful, and so they had information on Americans. It wasn't really available to them, but here it was, and so they were ordered to destroy all of the information that they had. And so, even though they knew morally this was the wrong thing, legally it was the right thing. And so these things, like, yeah, this is a choice. So I'll go back to the whole thing. The president gets to make these choices, right? Do we want to destroy NATO? Do we want to keep NATO? Is NATO? Who knows, right? These things can be fought over in ad time forever. But the Greenland thing, it seems like a lot of struggle over something that I think was accomplishable through more diplomatic means. Maybe, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like we were fed up, you know. But yeah, I don't know what the right answer is there. I just don't
Well,
know.
it's interesting. You bring up Marco Rubio, and there's a lot of memes going around that show him in the same position, and they show him with an Iranian turban, like he'll be the head of this, or a Hugo Chavez or Nicolas Maduro like sash,
Yeah,
overdone, like he's in charge. I've seen one of him in hunting gear because he's going to be the new governor of Minnesota or something. And what people don't remember Richard Holbrooke near as much, maybe, but
mm,
he was a deputy secretary of state guy who took on a lot of the thankless tasks of bringing people together. And you mentioned, yeah, Yugoslavia is not like as well off as West Europe or so, but man, the Dayton Peace Accords has been able to put a tamp down on a lot of fighting.
yeah,
And I'd like to see the deputies be stepping up, and you know, they could be somebody where that way we won't divide Marco Rubio's attention so much on so many different crises.
boy,
They could all
yeah,
report to him. He could wear his normal Secretary of State suit.
yeah. By the way, you mentioned the Dayton Peace Accords. A very good friend of mine, who I met at a NATO 70-year thing over at Troy University. I
Mm,
spoke at it with my buddy Rich. The His name was Robert Hunter, Doctor Robert Ambassador, Doctor Ambassador Robert Hunter. He passed away in January, and was a brilliant mind. And he's one of the very main guys in the room, and who led the Dayton Peace Accords. And he's the one that taught me a lot about, like, there's a lot of ways to get stuff done that doesn't involve Donald Trump yelling about Greenland. He's like,
mhm.
we actually were going to do a show, and then he had fallen down and he died the day before. So obviously he couldn't do it. But we were going to talk about his approach to Greenland. And I wish we would have gotten that conversation, because he would have gone back 70 years in time and said, here are the gates, here's how the
Right.
history goes. And we ended up in this spot. And so you don't have to go down that road. You could have gone, and it's amazing to see like real like professionals. And he's the kind of, and he would say, like, I'm going to get in trouble with my Democrat friends for saying this because he's a Democrat. He's like, but this Republican person has the right answer, or whatever it is. And he was from that generation of folks that were willing to work and did work together and do amazing things like the Dayton Peace Accords. And anybody who wanted to go back to 1995, and if you said, hey, we got these Dayton Peace Accords, I deployed under that motherfucker, right? It was like, we don't know. Like, they might start fighting right now. And believe me, there was still a lot of hurt feelings. There was a lot of anger, but
Mhm.
it worked. I don't know if we could have done it again, if like we wound it
Mhm.
up and did Dayton Peace Accords, big NATO deployment, and it worked. I don't know that it would happen every time. It's
Right.
these things are very touch and go all the time.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see what can be done with the democratic opposition of Venezuela, the current Venezuelan leadership, and then what others have.
Yeah.
Dust off the OAS, see what the OAS was able to do. Because I mean, people talk about the Dominican Republic, but after that operation, the 1960s, stabilizing the situation where they had different military groups fighting each other. There was
Yeah.
ideology, and they're not the richest country in the world, but that same democratic regime has been there since 1966. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not a small thing for one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere who was ruled
Yeah.
for 30 plus years by a brutal dictator.
Yeah. Now,
And
now,
so
now, truck
there are
left,
success.
and you end up in Haiti, and you're like, "What in the fuck? We tried our hardest there, right?"
Yeah.
It's, these are challenging
But
things.
maybe
You
that's where the OAS steps in and they can kind of help manage things, give us some political cover because
yeah,
Venezuelans, we're not the only proud people in the world. There are a lot of proud people, and they don't want to be seen as taking orders from a foreign leader. Nobody wants that.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
would
yeah,
people think they'd want that?
yeah,
Why are you saying the quiet part out loud and in public to say do
yeah.
this when you could probably get them to do it if you had some quiet negotiation? Didn't
Oh,
TR
see,
say something about
oh,
speaking softly and carrying a big old stick, or something?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just to go back to your Rubio point, the more things that they do not well, because you can't do that many things well, the more chaos. The seeds of chaos are easy to plant. They're in your bag already. You cast them out, and it's like, oh, there's chaos there. Where'd that come from? Well, our State Department in general has a history of ill-principled behavior, and the CIA isn't exactly the getting the principled behavior of the year award. I mean, there's a lot of problems that we create and foment through our desire to do things, and we have a tendency to, in terms of statecraft, pick a line and say anybody on that side of the line we're adversarial with, and they don't even know. Like, what are you
Mhm.
talking about? We're over here just living our lives in our country. Get the fuck out of our way. Like, we don't. This goes back to the people thing, and so we don't get these things right at a rate that allows anyone to stand on record and say, "Well, we're going to do this right." And I heard Secretary of State basically saying that, like, "Oh, I hate the term smart diplomacy because that means you have to couch it, and you're not going to deliver on that. And when you don't, where's the cost?" And so any Secretary of State, when they say those kind of things, well, we're just going to do it smarter. Bullshit. You're not, because I've seen how you all work, and they don't have a dude like Robert Hunter and myself who's on the ground doing these things. There's no connection there to talk and to make sure that theory and strategy is attached to what's happening on the ground in a way that makes sense. And so you don't get to own the outcome just because you think you're smarter. And that's a real critique of even though I think Secretary Rubio is doing a good job, I do think he's probably too busy to reliably get these things right. And again, there'll be no penalty for getting it wrong. And so that's where the ill principled behavior comes in, because they'll do things that are inappropriate and unethical, and we won't do anything about it. And no one will be held to account.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned about Trump and things like that. I thought, okay, well, let's just see what we can get with North Korea, and he thankfully didn't. Did he thankfully realized a bad deal is worse than no deal, and so he didn't go
Right.
there. But I give him points for trying. I mean, at one point, I mean, that's not how he was. At one point, he was making threats. North Korea was making threats. Things were escalating, and we forget about this as the Winter Olympics are starting. I mean, North
Right.
Korea made all kinds of threats. People are like, "Oh my gosh, the games are going to fall apart." And I
Yeah.
wrote a piece in the New York Observer that was talking about, well, there's always one sticking point, which are these joint exercises. Well, what if we didn't hold the joint exercises a few weeks before the Olympics? Maybe that might be a positive sign,
Yeah.
to show. And those Olympics were successful. There were people in our government, this is during the first Trump administration, who are like, well, let's just pull out of that Olympics. Well, that would have been disastrous to our South Korean and regional allies who
Yeah.
would have like lost tons of money. And so there were ways in which we kind of held back the joint exercises. We rescheduled them for later. Why do they have to be in February? I know military people would tell me a smarter answer, but nevertheless, politically, it helped, and it paved the way for at least what was like people saying my rocket is bigger than your rocket to, hey, maybe we can work out something. It didn't work, but it was a good try. I give credit for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna take us a little bit back in time, because there are these things that seem innocuous that do oftentimes crack the code. So we went into Iraq, all kinds of things happened. In some ways, you can say, hey, you know what? There is a democracy there now, and they're trying to sort themselves out. So I had a guy, and I've got another one coming up from Iraq talking about Iraqi politics. These are actual Iraqis, but they're part of the diaspora of the Iraqis around. And they're trying to still reduce Iranian influence, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think you can do a million things right, and the Iraqis are still going to be like too much Iranian influence. It's just always going to be a thing. And so it's fascinating to see what their take is and how they see it. And I'm desperate to get someone from Iraq who's in parliament to talk as honestly as they're able about why it's working. Because there's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of people like, hey, we're making progress. Yes, it looks ugly, but here we are in the middle of it, and we're better than we were 2 years ago, right? So these things are often in the moment in the fight. We see ISIS being bad or whatever it is, and then you scope back 10 years later. No one's even going to remember this stuff. Like these things, we move on to the next thing. And so I'm interested in what your thoughts are. Like as you see Iraq trying to sort itself out, do you have any thoughts on that? And I'm using Iraq as an example because I got these Iraqi guys
Yeah.
coming on the show, but they're
Oh,
very passionate people, and they feel like, hey, we're close, but we need less Iran in our lives.
yeah. I think the fall of the Assad regime, and Iran trying to send a lot of their stuff over to Russia, is a good example. I mean, now they've lost their allies. They kind of did that Paul Kennedy imperial overstretch. They tried to
Sure.
meddle in too many other people's things, and now they're kind of dealing with a huge rebellion and insurgency.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that will get Iran to pull back with that, especially the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, of trying to overthrow everybody else in the Middle East and start focusing on their home problems, which they clearly
Yeah.
have not done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe this will give
Yeah.
Iraqis, it'll give Iraqis, I don't know for sure. Maybe it makes them double down, like, oh no, we need to overthrow the Iraqi regime and make them ours or something. Maybe it makes them double down, or maybe it makes them
Yeah.
smarter and realize we're not doing as well as we thought we were 5 years ago.
Are you embarrassed to be an American?
No, God, no. I
Yeah.
love being American. I know we don't. There are a lot of quotes given to Winston Churchill, which he may or may not have said, but you've got America can always be counted on to do the right thing after trying everything else, or something like that. I realize we're
Yeah.
not perfect,
Yeah.
but yeah, I love this country and hope to always be here. I'm not like trying to figure out how I can sneak over to Canada or Costa Rica or anything.
Right.
It's a country worth
So
fighting for.
I watched. I have certain tests that I've developed. I'm glad to have these tests be wrong, but they're pretty reliable for me. So I watched the entire Scott Bessent meeting with Congress yesterday in the financial crew over there as they talked through these problems, and I saw the standard thing you always see. The Democrats came at him hard. They pulled their papers out. They asked these close, yes or no, will you commit? All this kind of bullshit that the opposition party always does to the person sitting there who's from the other party. And I watched the Republicans thank him and say all these wonderful things. But what I didn't hear was this isn't working. I didn't hear that. So when I see Scott Bessent doing his job, when I see Howard Lutnick at Davos saying, "Hey, when you work with us and we do well, you're going to do well," that seems to be a reasonable premise. Uh, what do you think about Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent, and how often have we ever paid attention to the Secretaries of Commerce and Treasury at this level?
You are right that we haven't paid as much attention to them, and I will admit as a professor that I don't know as much about the two of them. I know that Lutnick was more of a pro-Trump guy. He's on the same wavelength. Besant isn't like Trump's acolyte, so he may agree or disagree or something like that.
Right.
I'm just the best treasury and commerce secretaries are probably the ones that you don't hear from as much because
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
doing something good. If they're
Yeah.
if their names are in the press all the time, that may not be a good thing. Like I'm sure a number of military agencies think that way. Like some of the best are the ones that you don't see.
Sure. Yeah. No,
Because
absolutely. Yeah.
you're doing your job, not because you see us out there, waving a flag or so, but because they're doing their job and that nobody sees.
When you see the Trump presidency, the last one and this one, use America like a business machine, right? And so part CEO, the president is a lot of things. They are the chief law enforcement officer, they're the chief prosecutor, they're this, they're that,
Mhm.
but they're also the CEO. And so when we do well, do other countries do well with us? Is it good to partner with us, open trade? Is that how we're letting premise? Do you think that's accurate or at least possible?
Mm. Uh, I mean, I think we've done our best. I mean, whenever you look at great moments in America or something like that,
Yeah.
We'll take like an example, the Civil Rights Act in the
Yeah. Okay.
1960s. And then you think it was never about one side steamrolling another. You hear a lot of stories about bipartisan compromises that were being made where
Yeah.
Democrats and Republicans worked together on something.
Yes.
America's had a pretty good track record on fighting wars, and a lot of those had to be bipartisan. So, we hear about like when Gingrich and Trent Lott were in the House and Senate and Clinton was president, and we were
Yeah.
balancing budgets and, all that great economic times I tell you about. We're at our best when we have the fertile ground for both parties to trust each other and get something done. That's how I look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we kind of long for those times, and even then we had trouble.
Mhm.
It's just that's how these things go. And I appreciate you kind of being rangy with me on these topics, because we need to hear some of these conversations that you can have dissent and accord in the same conversation, and also admit like, hey, I need to know more about that. I admit it, you admit it. We both have admitted that thing in this conversation. It's amazing you can't master all of it. And so I'm willing to have my opinion be shaped by the next event and try to not get too emotional about it. I like to say here on the show is, if you find yourself reading a headline and you can't get through the whole headline before you're in a rage, you're being manipulated. And these machines right here are manipulation devices. And so don't allow, I'm not saying stay uninformed, but I'm saying stay a little more, like apathetic. Like hear the news, read the news, consume the news. Don't listen to secondary and tertiary sources, everybody. Go out, and if you want to hear what Scott Bessent thinks, watch him talk in front of Congress. Watch him speak on the different shows that he goes on, and then decide what you like. But if you have someone else process it for you and you don't dig in, you don't realize there's, heck, we talked about a movie from the 60s that John
Mhm.
uses to teach his kids. So there's a lot there. So I'll let you talk about that. And then I'd love to close on your book before we wrap things up.
Okay, sure. I agree. Every time I've had somebody go, "Oh, this is students or a colleague or something else," like, "Did you hear?" And it's so fantastical. It's like, now wait a second, like what's really going on?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you peel back the layers, yeah, sometimes somebody does something insane, but there are also plenty of times where it's like, well, somebody is pushing an agenda. How could this possibly happen? Well, it didn't exactly go that way. I agree. Consuming multiple sources. When I worked in Washington, I would read the Post and the Times, and that was pretty
Right.
helpful because I had to deal with people who came from who read both paper, or read one paper or the other, and I'd have to see where they were coming from. In
Yeah.
fact, my second book, which I got the book contract for, it'll come out later this year, is about an independent candidate for president who's
Yeah.
running. And what will happen is often, like the success of this candidate leads both parties to compromise in finding ways to kick this guy off the ballot and stuff. A lot of the battles are over ballot access. And why we don't, because a lot of people ask me, why don't we have a third party? Why don't we have more independent candidates? And I've told them, well, the hurdles are so incredible. In fact, that's the name of the main character, is Hurdle.
Mm.
The one who's running for office, at least, not
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the candidate who the protagonist is working for. And I've had people, oh, come on, those books are unrealistic. And I sketch it out and they're like, oh, okay, I see. But the thing you also get to see is, and I sketched it out in 2020. The election occurs 2/3 of the way through the book. The rest is a
Mm.
battle of what happens if nobody gets a majority.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
real fight begins, with everything.
Yeah. AKA the presidency.
Yeah.
Because these
I mean,
things are
yeah.
often, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got all kinds of chaos that get
Yeah.
us far before inauguration day or anything.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I didn't just the same thing with product placement. My first book, Branded, uh, I wanted people to realize a lot of times, you could be sold a bill of goods. We just talked about the
Yeah.
media right now. You are being manipulated in a lot of ways. You're being couched to think certain ways, and you got to start thinking for yourself. So I didn't just write books. I mean, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I mean, I understand the market is saturated, but I did want to get a couple people thinking.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I appreciate that. And here's the latest book. It's called Branded, and I'm gonna put did I put the link up already? I put the link up already, so you guys can get that. Talk about Branded for a few minutes, and then let's wrap it up. And thanks for
Okay,
coming on the
sure.
show, man. It's been fun.
Oh yeah, no problem. Love doing it. Yeah. So Branded is a book where you've got a firm that is engaging in product placement. For example, Pete, you know the O.J. Simpson slow speed chase. You remember?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of Americans. Oh my gosh, remember watching that? Well, believe it or not, Ford was going to get rid of the Bronco, but then with
yeah,
they kept it around for several more years, like even a decade or more. Those things sold out, especially white. Now,
yeah,
you remember probably, you know, may have happened a long time ago, but there was a painkiller that was poisoned with cyanide,
yeah.
right? You remember which brand it was or which company?
Tylenol. Yeah, I
Tylenol, yeah.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, what if you had a rival painkiller paid paid a firm to poison a couple of these, lead to a couple deaths, and then their
yeah,
stock takes a hit? So that's the premise is
yeah,
what if you had a
yeah.
firm that was creating events? What if the O.J. Simpson case was a manipulated event? And you know the media knows to jump on in, cover everything. We're being sold a bill of goods. So I have a professor and students, because they say write what you know, they start doing some research in their marketing class and start, they don't have all the answers, but they start uncovering a little more of the scheme. And when they publish their initial findings, the company realizes, uh-oh. And then you get to realize, as all of us do, if you're going to be targeted by somebody powerful, we don't have as many defenses as we like to think.
When you
We
say
have a
that,
lot of pain pressure points,
yeah.
and so that comes out in the book too. So they got to figure out how to get around these. And I decided to make a realistic ending
Mm.
where it's not like they come in guns blazing, spinning around. None of these people are perfect experts, but it's something that fit and was realistic.
Yeah, that's great, man. And it's funny. Those of us who are alive during the Tylenol murder era, you know,
Hmm.
what we probably know about that, what we think we know, and what actually happened are probably not the same thing, right? Because that messaging got in there and it set the concrete set
Right.
around that idea. And I could say, hey, that thing was a bit of a hoax. But no, it wasn't. No, okay. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying that it's a hoax, but what we know about it and what actually happened, because who has time to investigate that? I was 12 or something when that happened. The impression was made and it stayed imprinted in how I think about that time. And there's thoughts and there's smells and there's memories that go with that. You're not
Hmm.
unplugging all of that from someone. So it's powerful. It's a powerful narrative for if you did this thing, right? If you hired agents to go out and do these things. I'm a spy. I'm a firm believer in you can have an agent on the ground, and a lot of them, probably most of them, are going to fail in most of the operations they do. But if one hits, you're going to win, and you can undermine a lot of things if you just keep pushing on that, trying to find the pulse on what will make that thing change. So that's a cool concept, man. I love it.
Yeah. I
Anything
hope.
you want to? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
go ahead.
and I just want to say it's both of these are about getting people to think about why we
Mhm.
don't have third party candidates, why people get shut down. It's the
Sure.
system, like we were talking about earlier, or
Yeah.
like you said, there's a certain media narrative. Well, this firm is tied in with a network, and they control the story, they control the narrative,
Sure.
or and a
Yeah.
lot of people just let themselves be led by it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get led. Don't get fed. What else do you want to talk about? What do you want to ask me before we wrap up?
I would love to see, you probably, it's unconventional to have like a class of students on your show, but if you ever wanted to see what college students are thinking, it could go any different way. It would be a challenge. I'd love to have everyone crowded around and you ask them questions and
Yeah.
get to see what their responses are. Liberal, conservative, moderate like me. Who
Sure.
knows?
Yeah. There's a mechanism to do that in here. There's enough. We can put enough people in the room, but and I could do just if you have a screen like this. Let's see if it makes sense here, right? And so just imagine a whole
Mhm.
bunch of little U's, and then you throw John on the big window, right? And then I could manage that. So I'm. You know what? I like stuff that isn't supposed to work and that we want to try because that's how you do things. And for sure, we're going to screw it up, everybody, but we'll also have a good time. So we'll set that up and we'll get it done. Man, I appreciate you coming on the show, John. It's remarkable that we live in this time where we can have these conversations, and you can just see like, look, you can go read all of John's work, but you won't. But you do get to talk to him here and hear his thoughts. And how cool is that? And we have all kinds of different people on. We had somebody on from a band the other day. We had on an Iraqi guy who's trying to build a new political party. All kinds of stuff. I got a show that I have to put out today at some point about the sinking of the SS Central America back in the 1850s and a project that's
Oh my
coming out of that. All
gosh.
kinds of incredible things. So this is an
Mhm.
incredible time, you guys. So Like and subscribe. Obviously, do I have to say this? You guys know this. If you like this thing, subscribe. Is how you support people. Go check out John's work. Here's that book link right there, everybody. Go buy a book. You know what I always say? Books make great gifts. Buy two, start a
Oh
book
yeah.
club, and guess what? I know the author. He'll come talk to you. I promise.
Hmm.
If you have a book club and you're like, we read your book, we loved it. Would you come talk? John's that guy right there. He's going to say yes, right? So,
Oh yeah.
uh, any final notes, John, before I wrap this up?
Just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I love having this very cerebral discussion about a lot of different issues. It shows we can walk, chew gum, drink coffee, trim our beards, and all this at the same time.
Yeah, you're right about that. Stand by. I'll come back and say goodbye to you. Everybody else, I will see you. It could be later on today. I've got another thing possibly lined up. We'll see about that. Otherwise, for sure tomorrow. Everybody, I'll see you later.
Okay, thanks.